So, hello. The title of my talk, which you can't see on the screen because I have cleverly concealed the screen with a whiteboard, is Christian Muslim Enemy Friend. A 17th century playwright looks at honor across cultures. This idea of looking at some very old plays in a new context might have some new ideas, some world-changing ideas possibly, that might qualify as ideas worth spreading. So here we go, fasten your seatbelts. First, let me introduce and turn to my PowerPoint deck here. Like his Spanish Golden Age contemporaries, Lope de Vega and Tirso de Molina, Calderón remains mostly a mystery in American higher education and in the American theater, both academic and professional, to the impoverishment of all of these arenas. Only one of Calderón's more than 120 plays that he wrote during this long life, a play called Life is a Dream. Only that one play is widely known, widely studied, and very actually seldom produced by American college theater departments or even professional companies. So audiences quite literally don't know what they're missing. I've got some inside baseball statistics to back that claim up. There's a group called Theater Communications Group. It's the service organization for the nonprofit professional theater in America. It has about 500 company members. And they have a wonderful database that you can search. And in so doing, I found that between 1995 and 2010, a total of 21 productions, that's by the way out of a body of work of about 30,000 productions, 21 productions represented the entire Spanish Golden Age. A century of enormous achievement, comparable to the Elizabethan period in England. Calderón has 9 out of 30-some thousand. Right? Now, this survey misses academic stagings and some professional stagings, including my own of a play called The Constant Prince by Calderón that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. But the same database, looked at in the same way, reveals 73 productions of Ibsen, great Norwegian playwright, 78 of Chekhov, great Russian playwright, 85 of Molière. These are single playwrights who represent their cultures. Unsurprisingly, probably 1,324 productions of, guess who, Shakespeare. So here I am, proving obscurity, but claiming greatness. So that's a really great academic trick because you can often hide claims of greatness within obscurity, right? So we prove the obscurity, but besides the prevalence of that trick in academic circles, why would you let me get away with that? Maybe you won't. Here's one thought, and it has to do with a concept that we'll call range of reference. We value Shakespeare the more because we know him as the author of the tragic King Lear and the comic Twelfth Night, of the lyrical history of Richard II, and the magical romance of the Tempest. Homer gives us the heroics of the Iliad and the misadventures of the Odyssey. So one possible marker of greatness in a body of work, or in an author's work, or in an entire period of work, is the embrace of dualities, the juggling of contradictions without dropping them. That resonates, I think, again, with both the congressman's and the provost's invocations to us today. So duality, hold that in your mind, duality was, of course, part of the intellectual and cultural landscape within which our man Calderón found himself. The complex political, racial, and religious history of the Iberian Peninsula, that great peninsula that contains Spain and Portugal, required Spaniards to hold dualities constantly before them. As the historian J.H. Eliot notes in his book Imperial Spain, I'm quoting Eliot now, Castilian society was based on paradox and contrast. The contrasts were everywhere, Moorish and Christian, devoutness and hypocrisy, vast wealth and abject poverty. There was no moderation here, no sense of proportion, end of quote. I think that in these opposites, in these tensions, Calderón finds not only material for his body of work, but an entire habit of mind. His response as an artist is to meet this paradoxical world in full, spanning a range of genres over his 120 plays. Now let me impersonate Polonius from Hamlet for a minute here. The Cape and Sword play, the philosophical drama, the religious play, the honor and jealousy play, the historical play, the sacramental one-act play, the palace play, the novelesque play, the mythological drama, the zarzuela. That's a range, probably not complete, of Calderón de la Barca's genres. And yet, if we know this man at all, we know him through Life is a Dream. A great play, but only one play. But okay, you may be thinking these plays probably remain unknown for good reasons. Well, here's an answer for that. Eric Bentley, great critic of the drama, in America, wrote in 1970 an essay called The Universality of the Commedia. And he answers the most common suspicion about Golden Age obscurity, which is its location in an exotic place and time and its very specifically Catholic background. Bentley says, and I quote, "It's always a matter of equivalences. One does not need to be a Catholic," he says, "to enter into a great Catholic poem. The Jewish faith would do, as would the Muslim or the Hindu. One does not even need to possess faith in any of these theologies. One only need be able, in Coleridge's phrase, to suspend disbelief, to enter emotionally and for the moment into the believing attitude." That's the end of that quote. So, entering into that believing attitude, finding those equivalences, is actually not too hard with this material. Here's a historian and critic of the Spanish Golden Age, Michael Magaha, drawing some parallels, writing actually in 1990, but I think the parallels that he will talk about in a moment here are even more resonant today. He says, "Like the Spaniards of the 17th century, we live among the ruins of vanishing or vanished empires. We have experienced the bitterness of high ideals gone sour, economic chaos, pointless and unpopular wars, and government by cynical, self-serving bureaucrats. Our age is marked," present company accepted, "our age is marked by a world-weary desengaño, or disenchantment, loss of illusion, just as Lope de Vega's was." End of quote. So setting the stage a little bit, finally, the only way a work from the past will actually speak to the audience of today or the audience of the future is if it meets a test, a term called Resonant Insight. If a work meets this test of resonant insight, it has a chance of surviving and having meaning in the present day. So in this case, history, which we've had a little bit of a look at, provides the resonance, while the artist provides us with a clarifying lens through which to view the human spirit in new and deeper ways. That's what insight, literally looking inward, means to me. We come away from a successful artistic encounter feeling that our sense of possibility is enlarged, our being enhanced, our repertoire of askable questions increased. So, having made certain claims for Calderon's value, I've tried throughout the last few years to test these claims through efforts in translation and production. And I've had the great fortune to be involved with a number of Calderon productions as translator and advisor, and on a couple of occasions as a director. And I'd now like to share some observations about one of those, a 2007 production of The Constant Prince by Calderon for the Unseen Shakespeare Company, a small professional troupe in Pittsburgh, in an effort to demonstrate just how some of these values express themselves in an actual case. So, The Constant Prince. The Constant Prince is from 1629, and it ranks as one of the Golden Age's most accomplished religious dramas, and yet that label feels too restrictive to contain a play of such historical heft, such philosophical distinction, and above all, such poetic passion. Goethe, no less an authority than Goethe, said that if poetry, quoting now, "if poetry were to be lost from the world, this play alone could resurrect it again." Pretty good testimony from a good source. That play, as you might guess from my previous comments, has had very few productions in the American theater and is hardly ever read or taught. So our audiences in Pittsburgh in 2007, however, seemed to find resonant insight in the play's portrayal of a conflict of absolutes, religious faith and political power, two absolute terms in absolute contradiction, set on a 15th century battleground between Islam and Christianity, in which, and I think this is Calderon's signature achievement, both sides are accorded equal respect, dignity, and courtly honor. Now, the main action of The Constant Prince is deceptively simple. A map of the southern part of the Iberian Peninsula and North Africa. So the play is set in 1437, and a Portuguese army, and by the way, Spain and Portugal were still not quite united like they became later in the century. Portuguese army sweeps down to try to take the city of Tangier. And they wanted to extend their control in North Africa. And in the course of the battle, the character named Fernando, Prince Fernando, who is soon to be called the Constant Prince, defeats and captures the Moorish general, his rival, Muley. And then he releases him when he discovers that Muley is engaged in an all-consuming love affair, and his absence from his lover would spell doom to his romantic quest. So on the field of battle, he releases his rival. And this generous action by Fernando bonds the two characters forever. And Muley will struggle to repay this debt throughout the rest of the play. Now, the fortunes of war change. Fernando is then captured by the King of Fez, and the ransom for his release is a rich prize. The city of Ceuta, which is a city that, that was won at great expense by Christian forces, blood and treasure beyond count, 20 years before the action of the play. This ransom is accepted. This ransom is accepted by the King of Portugal, but rejected by Fernando. So the king says, yeah, let's give him the city back, we'll get our prince. And Fernando, in captivity, says, no, I won't take my freedom in recompense for this great city. He remains constant, the great title of the play. He becomes the constant prince in that moment, remaining constant in his Catholic faith, saying that he will sacrifice himself rather than see a Christian city return to Muslim rule. Now, no one on either side can quite believe that Fernando's faith will be strong enough to see him through the terrible degradation visited upon him by his captors. All parties to the ransom deal on both sides, except the constant prince, calibrate their strategies based on rational behavior, employing political rather than spiritual calculus. But Fernando's constancy is beyond reason, therefore incomprehensible to the king and the other king, King of Fez and the King of Portugal. In his captivity, he wastes away and finally dies, whereupon his ghost serves as the inspiration to the Portuguese army that has returned too late to free him. The Christian forces win a decisive victory at Fez and reclaim Fernando's body, secure in their belief that his spirit has found at last its proper home. So the play told this way is very easy to read as an encomium, as a hymn to the Catholic faith, and a justification of Christian hegemony. However, weaving through this main action is a more complex design that I believe locates the primary value system of the play in the concept of constancy itself, positioning constancy as a symbol of honor, the master theme of Golden Age drama, and itself an idea firmly bound up in cultural identity. Calderon shows us constancy and honor not solely in Fernando, but also in Muley, the Moorish general, who begins his mortal enemy and becomes his great and loyal friend, and to lesser degrees in the other Moorish characters. Now, at first glance, it goes against the grain and certainly contradicts most of the traditional criticism of this play to suggest that the moral compass of a play that is totally written from a Catholic perspective, that the moral compass of this play is a character trait shared by Christians and so-called infidels alike. But perhaps our own age has a slightly broader perspective on the interplay of the three Abrahamic religions, and certainly their conflicts and their collaborations are foregrounded now, today, in a way that resonates with 17th century Spain. 800 years of Arabic, Islamic, and Judaic accomplishment, and the spirit of coexistence and tolerance, known as convivencia, which obtained on the Iberian Peninsula for about 800 years, this could not be completely erased. Although by Calderon's time, in the 17th century, they were certainly diminished by a church and state that were fearful of decline, clinging to notions of honor bound up in religious orthodoxy and, another slide, limpieza de sangre, or purity of blood. Many of the horrors of the Inquisition were perpetrated in the name of limpieza de sangre. And they were contending, obviously, with internal and external threats to the empire. But I think that Calderon, this master of dualities, to remind you of that phrase, this Calderon, master of dualities, understood both the origin of these notions, along with their inherent injustice, and the cultural and spiritual loss to his people that they caused. And he crafted this play as an artistic response. So the prince's Islamic adversaries generally appear in a sympathetic light throughout. Initially, the King of Fez treats his prisoner like a courtier. If, later on, he is willing to imprison, humiliate, and starve Fernando, he is pursuing a military and political objective not without precedent in the annals of warfare and disturbingly recognizable in contemporary practice. Muley, the lovesick general, emerges not only as a hero on the battlefield, a daring friend to Fernando, but also a lover of high poetic imagination. Muley's paramour, Phoenix, speaks the most lyrical poetry in the play. And in her fatalistic sense of destiny, she offers the closest approach we find to a tragic sensibility. These Moorish characters are every bit the equal of their Christian counterparts in eloquence and honor, in their capacity to love, and in their intellectual distinction. And I would argue they embody to varying degrees the play's titular value, constancy. So it cannot be accidental that the first use of the term constant in the play belongs to the King of Fez. He says, receiving a military report from Moulet early in the play, "Well, whatever you have to tell me, let me hear. A constant soul can always find an equal place for good news and for bad." Now, Moulet's constancy, the prince, constancy has two strands. The first is his unwavering love for Phoenix, the confession of which binds him to Fernando in friendship. And the second, his pledge to save the prince, even at mortal risk to himself. The imagery that describes Moulet's pursuit of his love offers a vivid evocation of constancy as he wears down her resistance. So here's Moulet talking about his pursuit of his love. "Just as water makes a mark on stone by its persistence, not by force, but simply falling, always falling, even so my tears at last began to work upon that stone-hard heart, harder than diamonds. I didn't gain the victory by excellence or merit, just by love, my constant love, which softened her resistance in the end." So Moulet will persevere, and poetic justice will reward him as the victorious Portuguese king, in his final disposition of loose ends, commands that Moulet and Phoenix should be married. But a more courageous and more to the point, perhaps, demonstration of Moulet's constancy, however, comes in the form of an elaborate plan for Fernando's escape from prison, which Moulet details to him near the end of Act 2. And I have to excerpt it brutally here in the interest of time, but will preserve the main idea. So here, Moulet says, "I want you to know that in my heart, in the heart of a Moor, there's loyalty and faith. And so I'll break your chains. You'll put to sea with all your fellow captives and sail for home, sure of my safety here, since it will be easy to believe you all escaped from prison. So two great things will have been set free, my honor and your life." Now, Moulet's plan is ultimately foiled by Fernando's refusal to jeopardize his friend's life to win his own freedom. But the scene reflects Moulet's constancy in his friendship. And note the use of the word honor in that last line. That's another point at which constancy and honor face each other in the mirror and form a cultural bridge. One of the surprising and refreshing things about The Constant Prince, which is, in the end, obviously a devoutly Catholic play, is that it strikes our ears today as an affirmatively respectful view of two cultures in mortal conflict, though clearly written from the point of view of one of the combatants. If the passage of 4 centuries gains us any particular perspective, it's to look back and wonder at the cultural imagination of a great playwright who ought to be more a prisoner of his time and place than he turns out to be. Perhaps there's resonant insight in the unfolding of a 15th century tale, retold in the 17th century and then reimagined in the 21st. If Calderon can see the dignity and humanity, the honor and the constancy of the other in his time, isn't that something that we can take to use in the conduct of our lives? In other words, if he can do it, why can't we? So the experience of directing this play in Pittsburgh a few years ago suggests that indeed we can. Now, in theater circles, it's considered very bad form to quote one's own reviews by way of proving a point. But the alternative is worse. You have to take my word for what happened. So here we go. Just a couple snippets from the critical response to this production. And these are only quoted to suggest that the play's core values have impact in the immediacy of the theatrical environment. Here's Michelle Pilecki writing in the Pittsburgh City paper in 2007. And I quote, "Honor, loyalty, dignity, what are they doing as primary themes in a play about war, political maneuvering, and religion? Hint, neither the play nor the war is of recent vintage, though the Unseen Shakespeare Company's restoration of The Constant Prince speaks to today's audiences and might even inspire them. Though a story of its day, The Constant Prince is no relic," she says. "There is honor but no glory, no real villains, and ultimately, despite victories on the battlefield, no real winners or losers. It's a story still worth hearing in the flowing language of a classic storyteller." And here's one more quick snippet from another paper, the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, Alice Carter, the critic. And I quote, "At its heart is a battle between loyalty and honor, as well as the conflicting responsibilities of friendship and duty to country. It's a play that might well teach world leaders a few lessons on how to proceed when negotiating with allies and enemies." I swear I didn't write or pay for that line. It's not a bad excuse, I would say, for reading, translating, producing, or seeing a play. So my closing invitation to all of you is to seek out or be open to the offer of great works from the past that might not have found a home in the usual canons of syllabi and anthologies and productions and top 10 lists. Relish the resonant insight that reaffirms humanity's common struggles and offers us new salve for old wounds, new bridges across old cultural chasms.